Hey guys, what we're discussing here today is creating a new Azure Virtual Desktop deployment in Azure and joining those VMs that we create or the hosts to our on-premise domain controller, and then configuring them and logging into them and make sure they're working. And after that, we want to configure FSLogix for profiling so we can have persistent desktop. So the assumption here is you do have an Azure subscription. If you do not, you need to create one. You also have a VM running a domain controller with users. Now this can be on-premise or in Azure. However, if it's on-premise, you would need basically a VPN connectivity or some kind of connectivity between on-premise and Azure, as long as this storage account in Azure can reach this DC. And that's how it's done. Basically, you can have, again, connectivity to your on-premise DC, or you can run this DC. If you do not have on-premises DCs, you can create a new DC in Azure. And again, those users and groups are syncing to Azure. And so we will also show you how to create an image that you can use to add more host VMs in the future. So you wouldn't have to go through installing all your apps again and again. So you would create this image, install all the apps, and then prep it, and then use it basically to create the Azure Virtual Desktop host all the time. So with that being said, let's get to it and get started. So here's my domain controller, and here are my users, Dina, Peter, and Ralph. And they are already synced, as you can see, to Azure AD. I have them here. So the first thing we want to do, and I see a lot of deployments failed because of this, and people spend hours troubleshooting, is you actually need to register the Microsoft Virtual Desktop as a resource provider, and we do this from the subscription tab. So if I open a new tab here, if I go to subscription, and then there's resource providers, and we basically search for virtual. And this is the resource. As you can see, it's not registered here. Sometimes it's registered, but not by default. But if it's not, you will need to register this. Otherwise, it's not going to. And just highlight it and say register. And now it's registering this. I'm going to pause for a few minutes until it's done and then come back. Okay, so as you can see, I waited about 5 minutes, and as you can see, it's registered now. I also registered this. I'm not sure if it's needed or not for the image we're gonna create, but this does not cost you anything to register these providers. So go ahead and register it if just in case. So let's get. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is to create an image that would be used for our Windows Virtual Desktop deployment or Azure Virtual Desktop deployment. Now this image is created basically from a VM that already exists. So I already have this VM that I'm going to show you. One thing I wanted to mention is when you create this VM, I'm not going to create a VM right now. However, I'm just going to show you which image to use in order for this to work. So you come in and go through the creation of your VM. However, when you come in to choosing something, you would have to either pick Windows 10 multi-session or Windows 11 multi-session. They have to be multi-session in order for this to work. So you go to all images. And if you choose Windows 11, for example, it'll have to be this Windows 11 multi-session version. So now I'm going to go to my VM, which I already created here. As you can see, it's a Windows 11. And again, if you're doing it with Windows 10, it also works. This machine is not joined to the domain, and this is not very, very important. I also installed some software. You would install your corporate software on it. I have for the client, I have this app, and I have an image in an empty folder here, but you get the idea. So now we want to create an image from this machine. Let's see how we can do it. So the first thing we want to do is sysprep the machine. So we'll go to the C, Windows, System32, and sysprep folder. And here's the sysprep app. We right click it. And I usually run as administrator. We click generalize. And it's very important just to shut down the machine. Do not reboot it. And we'll go ahead and say okay. So this is going to go basically and go ahead and sysprep it and then shut it down. And once it comes back, we can create the image from it. I'm going to pause the video here and come back when it's done. And we'll see you then once I come back. One thing to also mention here that it does not matter what size you use for this machine. This size, you're not going to be, using it for your host VMs or session host VMs. This is just to create the image. But once we get to the AVD deployment, I'm going to show you how to pick the right size for your virtual machines that will be serving as session hosts. All right, the process has completed. And as you can see, this is the virtual machine I have. And it says it stopped. Okay, so now let's go ahead and create the image. So we'll go in the VM and click on capture. And again, it's selecting my prescription, my resource group. If you want it in a different resource group, pick something else. Here, I'm not going to share this in the gallery. I'm just going to create a managed image. And I'm going to choose to delete this virtual machine after creating the image because this machine is not going to be usable afterwards. This is the name. I'm just going to call it -1. And I'm going to review. And I'm going to create. Now I'm going to pause the video and come back when it's done. Okay, our image is completed. And now basically the next step is to start the Windows Virtual Desktop or Azure Virtual Desktop deployment. So in this section, we're basically going to go to Azure Virtual Desktop. If you don't have it here, you can simply type Azure Virtual Desktop and it'll show up here and you click on it. So we're going to go ahead and create a host pool. And again, this is our subscription. I'm going to go ahead and put it in my current resource group. Now the host pool name, I'm going to call it Azure MAZ pool. It's in the East US. That's where I am. It's non-validation. Now the app group, you can go with desktop or remote app. I'm going to go with desktop because I want my users to log into the VMs. But if you want to create an app, let's say Microsoft Word, and you want them to log in and just start Microsoft Word or any app of your choice without logging into a machine, you can choose a remote app. But for this lab, we're going with desktop. Now, the next thing is to select the host pool type. We have both personal and pooled. Basically, the personal is you're assigning a user or a couple of users to the same machines, and they log into the same machine. With pooled, basically you have 2, 3, or 4 VMs, and all users log into any available resource, and that's what I'm going to pick here, the pooled. Now, in order to pick your load balance and algorithm, we have the breadth first and the depth first. And if we read here, basically the breadth first distributes the users across all available VMs, and that's what I really usually use. The depth first basically keeps sending the users to the same machines to the same machine until you reach the maximum limit, and then it goes to the next machine. I always would rather go with this algorithm. Now, here, the maximum number of users per session host, that really depends on the size of the machine. And we're going to discuss this in a lot of details here once we pick the machine we use. So Microsoft has some recommendations for how to pick the VM size that you're going to be using. So I'm going to leave a link to this site here from Microsoft. So they have a light user, a medium, a heavy, and a power. Now in production, I have not seen you know, a deployment that works smoothly with medium or light. You know, having 4 users per CPU is really, or 6 users per CPU, unless they're only going in to use Microsoft Word or just to browse a website or a couple of websites and such, it would be okay. But usually we go with the heavy, and if the users are using apps that use databasing or lots of PDF writing, or you know, apps that require heavy CPU usage, would go with the power, which is 1 user per CPU. But the average, I usually go with 2 users per CPU. So if we pick a machine with 4 CPU, that basically can host 7 or 8 users working smoothly. And it, of course, you have to count for the RAM as well. So Microsoft recommends 8 CPUs and 32 gigabyte of RAM, and that basically would allow you to have 16 users on this machine working on it. So we're gonna go, depends on the size I'm gonna pick in the next session. I'm gonna just leave this empty for now for this lab, but you get how the idea how we calculate this thing. So next we are creating the virtual machines, and I'm gonna tell it yes, add virtual machines, and I'm gonna disable. I'm gonna the this is the resource group that I always use. The name prefix. This is what Azure would call your host sessions hosts. So I'm gonna call it MAZ host. And now if I create 2 machines, Azure would call them MAZ host 1 and MAZ host 2. If I created 3, it'll add number 3 and so on. So I'm going to call this an Azure Virtual Machine. East US, that's where I am. I don't need any availability zones. I do not want a standard TPH. I'm just going to go with the regular. Now I'm going to select an image from here. And that's the image we actually created. And if I go to my images here, I can see my image that we created. I'm going to select this one. Now for the size, again, we discussed the sizes here. So this machine has 2 CPUs, which hosts 4 users. On the heavy, I'm going to change the size since this is a lab. I'm going to go with a cheaper one and just go with this one. It's 2 CPUs and 4 gigabyte RAM. And this basically will be good for 4 users or so. Number of VMs, I'm going to tell it to create 2 VMs. The hard drive, it's always good to have premium SSD in production. I'm going to go with standard. You can enable or disable boot diagnostics. For this lab, I'm going to disable it. In production, it's always good to have it. Now your virtual network, here it is. This is my virtual network that I already have, and this is the subnet where I want to have it in. I'm going to have a basic network security group. I'm not going to allow any ports for security. Now we come into this piece, and in this piece, basically, we really want to join those machines. We can join them now to AD, or we can join them later, but it's easier to join them now. So we're going to have to take few more steps beforehand in order to do this. We're going to have to set up our DNS in Azure to basically recognize our domain controller. So I'm going to leave this page open and go here to a new page. And I'm going to go to my virtual network. So I'm going to type here virtual VNet. This is my virtual network that I'm deploying the AVDN. And I'm going to go to DNS DNS servers. And currently, if we decided to join those machines to our domain, which is imazurelabs.com, it's not going to be recognized because we're using external DNS. But we want to use our domain controller, which we have. And the domain controller that we have has an IP address of, let's go take a look at it quickly. We go to virtual machines here. This is my domain controller. And the IP address is 10.4, 16.10.4. So that's what we want to use for a DNS server. And we're going to save this. Now, this is very important because now if we want to join those machines to our domain controller, basically they will recognize the domain controller and the domain from here. So again, this is our domain here. This is our domain, imazurelabs.com, and that's where we want to use. Okay, so going back to creating the host pool. So select which directory you want to join. So I do want to join Active Directory. Okay, and here we're gonna enter our domain admin account from our domain controller to join the machines to the domain. And this is the domain admin account. I have it in ID, and that's the built-in domain administrator account. It's at imazurelabs.com. Now I'm not gonna use specify a domain unit. I'm just gonna have it join them to the default OU, which is computers. Now next I'm gonna create a username and a password to log into those virtual machines, a local admin account. You can use whatever local admin account you want. Now next, we're going to go to workspaces, and yes, I will create a workspace. And I'm going to click on create new. You can call the name whatever you want. I'm going to call it MAZ workspace. Now we go to advanced. I'm not going to enable diagnostic settings in this lab, but you can certainly do in production. Go to tags. You can create one if you want. I am not going to create one here. Then we hit review and create. We validate the pool, and now we hit basically create. Oh, this is going to take some time. I'm going to pause the video and come back when it's done. Okay, our deployment is ready. If we go to resources here, there are 2 total machines and 2 can connect, as you can see. I did want to show you something also, the properties of the deployment. Here you can actually set up the options for your deployment, like device redirections and display settings. If you want to have multiple display and such, you can set up all these things here. They're pretty straightforward. You just can go through them and pick whatever you want from them. Now it's time to give permission to who can log into Azure Virtual Desktop. So I do have a group in my Active Directory. It's called MAZ Users that contains Dina, Peter, and Ralph. So I'm going to give this group a permission to log into Azure Virtual Desktop. And it's already synced in Azure, so I'm just going to choose it from here and assign it. And once you add it, you just have to wait a few minutes because it takes some time for this to sink in. And then we can basically, we'll be ready to log in and test our deployment. And now we're ready to log in. You can log in through the browser, or you can log in using the remote desktop app. I tried to log in through the browser, but Azure was having a problem. I'm going to show you. I basically logged in, and I'm just getting, once I enter the credentials, I'm just getting a blank screen. I downloaded the client, and I'm also going to leave a link to download in the client, so you can either log in with using the web or a client. And it's an app you install on the machine that you want to use, and you once you install it, you come into this screen. So I'm gonna hit subscribe and log in with it with the username that I used. So it's dmaze. Right, and we'll sign in. Okay, as you can see, we have the remote desktop. If we double click it and we log in, we already logged in, but we need to enter the password again to log into remote desktop. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. And here we are, logged in. This is our virtual desktop. It's gonna take some time to log in because this is our first time logging in. And if I go back to my host pool, just to see, I do have an active session here. If I click on it, I can see that Dina Mays is actually connected, and here's her machine, and here's the remote desktop. Now, anyone else can log in. However, again, at this point, every user can log in, but if I saved something here on the desktop or on my documents or anywhere, and come tomorrow or later on, and I connect it to the other virtual machine, I'm not going to find this document, and this is just basically not practical for companies. So the next section here, now that we tested our Azure Virtual Desktop, the next section here we're going to do is create FSLogix profiling and attach it. So whenever users basically log into Azure Virtual Desktop, they'll always find their documents, whether they log into the first machine, second machine, or even if we have 100 machines. So let's get to the next part and do that. Okay, so going back to our topology, we've completed part one, and now we're going to go to part two. So we're going to create a file share for FSLogix. We're going to join this file share to the domain, and we're going to create some GPOs for this file share to control who can access it and how the access works. We're also going to create an SMB share and assign to users, of course. And that's going to basically create the persistent storage. So let's get to it. So the first thing we want to do is create a new OU where we're going to join this file share that we're going to create and apply some policies to it. So I'm going to say create new OU. You can name it whatever you want. What I'm going to name it is no computer password expiration. Is what we want to do here is basically when we join this storage to the domain, by default, the password for this device will expire and renew every 30 days, and that's just going to disrupt the connectivity. So I'm going to apply a policy that would basically stop this from happening every 30 days. And this way, basically, we're going to have a continuous, no disruptive environment. I'm going to right click this new OU that I created. And I want to make sure that I'm on advanced features here so I can get to the attributes of this OU. I'm going to go to attribute editor, and I'm going to look for the distinguished name, and I'm going to copy this and put it on the side because we're going to need it. Next, I'm going to go to group policy management and just create a new, basically group policy. You can call it whatever you want. Again, I'm going to call it the same thing here. And then we're going to now edit this policy so we can set it up. So we're going to go to computer configurations, policies, Windows settings, security settings, security options, and go to domain member, maximum machine account password age, and basically set this to 0. So this way it would never expire. And simply now link this to the OU which we created basically. So I am going to the OU and I'll right click it and I say link an existing GPO and just pick it. And it's linked now to the OU we have that we're going to join the file share to. Now the next thing, we're going to go ahead and create the storage account. So we'll go to storage accounts and create new one. This is my subscription. And again, this is my resource group. You can choose to create a new one if you need to. You can name the storage account whatever you want. I'm going to call it Azure Labs. Or you know what? Let's call it AVD Profile 24. I am in the East US, so I'm going to keep it here. And that's an I. We're going to go with premium. This is very recommended for low latency. And we're going to create a file share. In production, you might want to make it geo-redundant. I am doing it for this lab as locally redundant, but in production, you might want to do it zone redundant for high availability. Click next. We're going to leave this just on the defaults. Now for networking, really this is you do not want to enable your storage account to be accessible from outside or from anywhere, only internally, because you basically have connectivity to your domain controller and you want everything to be internal. So we're going to disable public access to this this endpoint and create a private endpoint. And what this does is creates a local IP address in your subnet to the storage account. In this way, we can basically access it. So I'm gonna go ahead and add a private endpoint. I'm gonna call it AVD private endpoint PEP, and that's again a file share. We're gonna pick our virtual network in our subnet. By the way, if you need some help with creating virtual networks and subnets and such, I do have other videos in my channel. You can search for them, or I can leave a link below for this as well, so you can do it. We're going to integrate this with DNS because we do want to be able to access it by DNS. So we're going to leave this as default and say OK. And this is going to take a couple of minutes. All right, so it's already created. Next, data protection. We're going to leave this as is. Encryption, we're going to leave it as is. We're going to review. And we're going to create. Now pause and come back once it's done. Okay, the deployment is done. We'll go to the storage account. And what we need to do is basically create a file share. So we will go with new file share. I'm going to call it users profile. Now the provisioned capacity, it depends on what you need. This is a 1 terabyte. I'm gonna make it maybe 250 gigabyte if they allow me up, or even less. I'll make it 100 since this is a lab. But so you get the idea of basically this is going to be shared with all users. If you have 10 users that would be using virtual desktop and you set a 1 terabyte, all users would be sharing this 1 terabyte and so on. And we will be uh, creating policies to restrict how much um, usage they can use. What's the maximum of gigabytes they can use? By default, it's set up to 30 gigabytes for FSLogix, but we'll go through it. So the protocol we need SMB. It is a good idea to enable backup. This would enable backup for the profiles. I am not going to enable it now, but you can, in production, it's a good idea to basically do it. Go ahead and create it. And I'll pause and come back once it's done, or maybe it's done already. Okay, so at this point, our file share is ready. And however, we do not have access to it. So let's go ahead and change the access we created. So what I do here is enable from selected virtual networks and IP addresses. And we're not going to add anything here. We're just basically, this is the firewall from external. We're telling it just to enable it from selected virtual networks and IPs, and this is private. So we only need to enable it, enable the firewall, but we do not have to specify anything. And I'm going to show you the private endpoint that we created. So if I go to it and I go to DNS configurations, as you can see, this is the fully qualified domain name, and this is the private IP address. It gave it .7, and this is basically our URL. If I ping now this address from here, as you can see, it's already pinging and it's given a private IP address, so we're good. Now, if one thing that is very important to notice that I am using a DNS server, or my domain controller is in Azure. So if I go to my DNS server and I go look up forwarders, I will see that Azure is forwarding my DNS to Azure DNS. So I am actually able, if I run NSLookup on the file share name FQDN, I am able to get the private IP address, and that's gonna work. But what if your domain controller is not in Azure and this forwarder does not exist? That's not going to work. So what we need to do is, if that only applies if your domain controller is not in Azure, it's on premise and you're connecting via VPN or ExpressRoute or so, and you don't have this forwarder on the domain controller. So what we need to do is we go to a forward lookup zone, and we want to create a new zone, a primary zone. Just go with the defaults to all domain controllers. And a zone name, basically, we're going to call it is this part here. And we get done. And now that I have this zone, I'm just going to create a new host. And it's going to be the name of our file share. And the IP address, which is 172.16.10.7. And now if I flush my DNS, if I run NSLookup again, as you can see, now I do get the private IP address. And basically now my DNS servers on premise would recognize this file share as a private IP, and this way we can continue. Okay, so at this point we need to join this storage account to our Active Directory domain, and we do have a Microsoft page that tells us how to do it here. I'm going to leave a link to this below. Now, there are some prerequisites that you should have. Please make sure you have all these installed and ready before you start doing anything. You'd also have to download the files hybrid module. It's a zip file. I already downloaded it and I unzipped it, and it's here. Those 3 files. And the last thing you need to do is scroll down, copy all this, and paste it in a PowerShell, ISE PowerShell. And I already did here. And we're gonna have to fill out some values basically here, which I already pre-filled so we can save some time. So if we look at this, we're gonna start running this. So first we set the execution policy. I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And then make sure you are in the folder in the path where you have the script downloaded. So it's, in my case, it's ctemp az files. That's the one we downloaded from the page, the zip file. So I went there to that path and run this command. And now run this command. And now we need to connect to Azure. I'm going to go ahead and enter the credentials, username and password. Okay, and now we're logged in. Now we need to fill out some information here. If you look at the main page that I gave you earlier, which is this one. So as you can see here, it says enter your subscription ID. I already pre-filled it. If you need your subscription ID, you can go to Azure and go to subscriptions. And this is the subscription ID. Next, you need the resource group name. And that's where your storage account is. So my storage account is, resource group is under Azure Labs. So I put it in there. Storage account name. This is my storage account name. And then this is the SAM's account name. This is basically the domain admin account you're going to be using to join to your Active Directory. In my case, I have it as Elmaze. This is the user. The domain account type, if you open the Microsoft page here, they're giving you 2 options, computer account or service account. And I'm putting it as a computer account, so just delete the other one. The OU distinguished name, this is the one we got from the attributes editor earlier from here, from Active Directory for this OU. And here's the distinguished name, so I copied it and just put it in there. And the encryption type, they're giving you 2 options, and they recommend going with AES 256, so I'm going with this one. Here it is. And basically, those are the values. I'm going to go ahead and run these just to pre-fill the values for Azure. And now we're going to select our subscription ID. And we're going to go ahead and run the join domain name. Okay, looks like we are joined and successful. You can, the last thing it says, you can run debug storage auth just to make sure you are in good shape. Basically run this command. And it's checking connectivity and everything. So this is making sure also that port 445 is open between the storage account and our computer so we can manage it. If it's not, basically you'll get error and you'll see what's the error. Port 445 has to be open between this machine you're mapping the storage to and the storage account. So I'm going to pause until this runs. It's going to take some time, and then I'm going to come back. All right, so now that we're done, we verified everything is good. If we go to our OU, which is the no computer expiration, I can see that this has been joined as a computer account. So at this time, we need to set up some permission access on the storage account. So what we need to do is go to the storage account and to the and then we're going to go to file share. Click on the file share that we have. And then we go to access control IAM. And then we're going to click on add role assignment. Or rather, we can do it in an easier way from here. Add role assignment. And then we're going to search for SMB elevated. So this is the permission. It's SMB elevated contributor. And who do we want to assign this to? This is not the users that would be logging in to our Azure Virtual Desktop. Rather, this is your global admins that would be managing this. So in my case, I'm just going to add, for example, the user L3. Elmaze, I'm sorry. And Elmaze is already actually an owner on this account, but I'm just showing you if you want to add someone in your organization as a global admin and you just want to assign them to manage this share, you can. So that's how we do it. And now we need to add another one for the users that would be accessing our AVD. And that's because we want them to be able to actually load the profile, the share name. All right, so we're not going to go with elevated. We're going to go with the SMB share contributor, this one. And this is going to be assigned to the group that I have all my users in, which is the MAZ group, MAZ users. And those users are the ones that log into Azure Virtual Desktop. So now at this point, I am ready to actually map my network drive, my file share, and start giving permissions on it as well. So if I go to overview under the user profile file share, I can copy the FQDN to map it. So I'll go to map network drive. And I'm just going to change this WAC to the other one. And here like this. And I'll click finish. And as you can see, now we mapped it. Now we have the user profiles in here, and we can actually start doing some permissions on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a folder, and I'm going to call it something, maybe AVD profiles. And I'm going to start setting up permissions on this folder. So I'm going to right click it, go to properties, security, advanced, and I'm going to disable inheritance on this. And I'm going to choose convert inherited permissions into explicit permissions on this object. I'm going to say apply. Now I'm going to basically remove authenticated users from here and also remove users. And I'm going to choose the creator owner, and I'm going to change this to modify only by removing the full control here. Add. So we're going to add the group, which is MAZ users. And we're going to give them modify permission to this folder only. And those are all the permissions we need, basically. Just follow them as is. And now we're actually ready to go ahead and download and configure FSLogix app. Now, FSLogix usually is actually, it comes in preloaded on all multi-sessions. However, I decided to remove it from the virtual desktop just to show you basically how, if just in case if it's not there, so you can download it and configure it the same way. So I'm going to go ahead and log into Azure Virtual Desktop now. So I just went to this link and downloaded FSLogix. And I'm going to leave a link for this. You can also Google download FSLogix. And I'm going to take this and copy it to the virtual machine, which is the the remote desktop. Once I log into it, and we're going to install it there. Of course, you want to make sure it's pre-installed on the image before you start running it, because you want the image with the FSLogix. It makes life easier. Okay, so here it is. I'm going to go ahead and install it. And again, usually it comes pre-installed. So FSLogix installation. And just set it up with the defaults, basically. Okay, setup is successful. And now I'm going to go back to my domain controller. We're going to create some policies on the session hosts that we have. So now I have the 2 session hosts here under computers. I'm going to create a new OU. You can call it whatever you want. I'm going to call it session host. And I'm going to move the 2 machines that I have here to this OU. So we now need to create this Logix group policy. In order to do that, we will need the ADMX and ADML files. Now, if you have this in your, if you have FSLogix in your group policy under templates, that's fine. Otherwise, we just basically go to the zip folder that you extracted, which has the installer, and you'll find ADML and ADMX. Copy both. And I'm going to copy them from here, from this machine, and put them back to my domain controller so we can use them under temp. Or I already have them actually here, but it doesn't matter. So now I'm just going to open a new file explorer here and go to my domain. File, imagerlabs.com, policies. And I do not see a policy definitions folder here, so I'm just going to create a new folder and call it policies definitions. And I'm going to move or copy the ADMX file here. Now the ADML goes into under a different folder. I'm going to create another folder and call it en underscore dash us. Now you have to follow the exact format, small letter dash capital letter. And I'm going to move or copy the ADML file here. Now, if you're running multiple domain controllers in your environment, make sure you wait for them to replicate or force the replication, so this would appear everywhere. And now we want to open our group policy, and we want to create a new GPO. We can call it something like FSLogix profiles. Now we will edit this. Administrative templates. And as you can see, now I have FSLogix here, which is what we added earlier. So I'm going to go to profile containers, and where it says enabled here, I'm going to enable it actually. Now for the VHD location, here we want to enter, we want to enable it, and we want to go to the path for our file share and put it in there. So I'm going to go ahead and copy it from there. user profile, and then I'm going to click on browse, and that's what we want. That's the share we want. So basically, I'm going to copy this. Oops. Okay, so here is our path to the folder we created. I'm going to say okay. Now we have the size in MB. Now the default is usually 30 gigabyte, but you can specify to whatever you want. You want to specify the profile. So every user that logs into Azure Virtual Desktop would have a quota of 30 gigabytes, 50 gigabyte, 40 gigabyte. It depends on how much you want to give them, maybe 100 gigabyte, depends on your storage. So I'm just going to leave it at the 30,000 megabytes with 30 gigabyte. Now we go to the setting, delete local profiles when VHD should apply, and we enable it. And now we will go to container and directory naming. And let's just enable the flip-flop directory name. Also for the VHD or VHDX, let's pick VHDX for the type. And now let's simply link this GPO to our new OU. So we go to session host, link existing GPO, and this is the one. Now let me log off from here and log back in so I can see the new group policy applying. All right, so now if I want to log back in, all right, I'm logging in right now to the Azure Virtual Desktop, and it's going to take time to create a profile. But if I go now to my file share, I can see that there's LMaze, which is my new profile, and it's creating a VHDX for me. So now every time I'm going to log in, and this takes a little bit longer time the first time you log in to create a profile, but then it becomes a lot faster. And so every time now I'm going to log in, whether I have one machine or 100 virtual machines, and whether I log into the first one or number 100, my profile from the storage account would attach to me, and whatever I saved on my desktop, documents, or anywhere will show up. And once I log in, I'm going to do a quick demo for that. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and create something new here. And I'm going to call it test folder. And maybe create some, and maybe move this image, or no, you know what? Let's create something inside, something new. Maybe a text document, test, and just write something in it. So now, to see what host I'm on, I am on, if I type host name here, I am on MAZ host 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this host on drain mode. And what drain mode means is do not allow anyone to log into this machine. So currently, if you see here, I am connected to it. I'm going to sign myself out, log off user. I'm logging off, and I'm gonna put it on drain mode. So this way, the next time I'm gonna log in, it's gonna force me to go to MAZ host 1, and we're gonna see if my new folder is there. So let's log in. And now we're definitely going to 1 because it did shut down. The other one shut down. All right, so here it is. We logged into the new machine, and here's my test folder. And here's my test document. If I go show you the host name, here's the gibberish we wrote earlier. And this is host 1. And basically, if I have 1 host, 10 hosts, wherever I log in, my profile is going to attach to me, and I'm going to get whatever documents I have. And that's, my friend, how you create the persistent desktop for Azure Virtual Desktop. And this is basically, this course is from 0 to hero, where you can have a full deployment. Make sure you like this video and you subscribe. I'm going to be posting more videos about Azure Virtual Desktop in the near future. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.